My name's Gloria Erickson, and I work for a company called Dovetail Partners Incorporated. We have the contract with St. Louis County to manage the Firewise program. But I am a resident here, and I've been here for 26 years. And so I am so excited to see all of you here. I mean, this is wonderful, and thank you for pulling this together, because I think this is super important, especially in light of the Brimson Complex fire and the Munger Shaw fires recently. So so you have my first slide, Present. Oh, there you go. Okay, this is what I really wanted you to see. Okay, next one. All right. So Bart said we want you to come and talk, but you know, a lot of us have heard your spiel. Okay, and I know that. But what I want to say to you, this is not a spiel. This is science. This is experience. This is things that we've observed in a wildfire situation before and after. And some of the things we're going to talk about today are some of the things that you can do as a landowner, as a community, to help yourselves be more resilient in a wildfire. Not fireproof, but more resilient in a wildfire. And I like to think of it, so first of all, I just want to say, a lot of the examples of what we're hearing coming back from the Brimson fire is, wow, you know, some people did Firewise best practices, their house was saved. I had contractors calling me, Gloria, I did all this balsam removal, 5 acres. And unfortunately, the person did not do Firewise best practices around their house, and their house burned down. Okay. So again, these practices are not foolproof. That fire was incredible. The conditions were unbelievable. And unfortunately, we lost 146 structures. But the good thing is nobody was killed and nobody was hurt. Minor. So again, I want you to take these things that we're going to talk about really seriously. We also don't want to blame the victims that did lose their homes, because there's a lot of different reasons and challenges out there of why people don't do some of these actions that we're going to talk about. And the biggest thing is not realizing we have a wildfire risk here. So here's a map from our state hazard mitigation plan that shows one of the highest risks that we have in St. Louis County and Lake County is wildfire. Okay. The county is multiple land ownerships. We're talking federal, state, county, private, tribal, businesses, railroads, multiple land ownerships. Wildfire doesn't care about ownerships. Okay. So that's why we have to work together with all the different ownerships and strategically planning to be ready for a fire. Next. So this statistic, 90% of our wildfires in the state of Minnesota are caused by humans. Some people are like, oh, that is so horrible. You know what I say to that? It's opportunity. It's opportunity for us to be able to do something about it. Because if 90% of our fires are caused by wildfires, that means we can do something. So I am confident and excited about what we can do as landowners and as communities. Next. So Aaron mentioned this concept of a fire adapted community. So what is a fire adapted community? For me, it's the biggest umbrella. It's our community here. You, as a community member, have chosen to live here. No matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, you get a choice to be here, and you love it because of the forest and the lakes. And so that choice, with that choice, you also recognize that there's a risk. If we're going to live in the forest or next to the forest, there's risk of wildfire. And with that risk, we as landowners and we as community members need to take responsibility. We have the responsibility to take care of not only the forest, the health of the forest, but also lowering our risk to wildfire. Everyone has a role. We can't just rely on the Forest Service to come and save us, or the DNR, or the county, or our volunteer fire departments. You, as members of this community and landowners, have a role to play to help protect those people who are trying to protect you. And again, did I underline the volunteer fire departments that we have? 77 volunteer fire departments in St. Louis County alone. These people are not doing this for the money. They're doing it because they care about their communities and they care about you. So the least that we can do as community members is to help protect them and do whatever we can to protect them. So here to show this wildfire resiliency wheel. I'm just going to touch on a couple things that we can do as community members. One of the things is actually creating a plan. We call it a community wildfire protection plan. We have one for St. Louis County, but Ely and Morris Township have worked together to create their own, what I call, mitigation action plan. And what that is they sat down, different community members, supervisors, fire people, sat down and looked at the wildfire concerns that they have for the community here, started prioritizing what are some of the things that we want to take care of first, what are the actions that we can do, and do we need funding for that? What do we have in the community to implement those actions? Evacuation planning and recovery. Brad talked about that. We're providing educational opportunities like tonight. Again, I really want to say thank you very much for coming to one of these events. I also am able to come to neighborhood groupings. If you want me to come there, I do Firewise evaluations. So again, that's really key. Incentives, we'll talk a little bit about that. Thinning and removal of your hazardous woody debris. Again, that's really important around your properties. Providing disposal options. Oh my gosh, if we're asking you to cut down your trees, we better have some options for you, right? So this is another thing that I'm working really hard on. I know right now that the county charges for that. Believe me, I'm working on that to try to get rid of that. But I also want to give a shout out to the U.S. Forest Service, who has multiple disposal sites throughout St. Louis County and Lake County that is free to landowners when they're removing their debris. Another part of this resiliency or a fire adapted communities is prescribed burning. Prescribed burning is a tool to help lower our risks from wildfire. Community actions. I love this picture. This is your community working together on shipping events, educational events, neighbors helping neighbors when you can't do it on your own, and strategically planning. This is really important. This is the goal that I really want you to think about, is how can we work together? Next. So, the spiel, okay? Firewise, we call this Firewise best practices. It is, again, like I said, a lot of scientific data looking at the things that we're going to talk about here that have helped homes, structures from being lost in a wildfire situation. Again, not fireproof, but it lowers your risks and helps you. in a wildfire situation. So 4 key things, we're talking about signage, access to your property, the site itself where your structures sit, and the structure, what's it made of. Signage, okay. My wildland firefighters and emergency first responders. Gloria, if there's anything you can write home to landowners, signage is key. What does that mean? If you're out of the city limits, you want to make sure that you have a 2-sided reflective 911 sign or address sign. You want to make sure that there is no vegetation around it. You want to make sure that it is posted a minimum of 4 feet off the ground, 10 feet from the main road, 10 feet from your driveway. Know all that snow we get and all the plowing? That's a big reason why. Okay? And also, this isn't quite facing the right way. We want it flagged towards your driveway. So it's going down the driveway. And why is all this stuff important? Okay, so your local firefighters probably know how to get to your property. But if we have a hotshot crew here from Montana and they have no idea about addresses here and stuff, and it's smoky and it's chaotic and they need to find your property, it's like you want to make sure that they can find you in that kind of situation. If they drive by, you want to make sure that they can turn around and come back and see it. So this is key. If you don't have a brand new sign, $35, St. Louis County, good insurance. Please do that for your firefighters and your ambulance people. Next. All right, property access. Does this look familiar? Huh? Is that your driveway? I hope not. Because you see how big that rig is, that structure rig? Skinny little path, snow. Hudson, next. All right, so what do? We recommend a minimum of 14 feet wide clear, okay? That means all branches, because these rigs are big. I was just at Brimson. Their rig there, their structure rig is 10 feet wide with mirrors that make it a little bit wider. So we want to make sure that your driveway is cleared 14 feet and 14 feet high because they're big rigs. You don't want one of those mirrors to be ripped off. 20 grand easily when one of those mirrors gets ripped off. Okay. You also want to make sure that your firefighters are looking down your driveway and going, yeah, I'm okay with going down there. Okay. So another thing about the driveway, right, is you want, if you are putting in a driveway, a straight driveway is better than one of those cute little curvy ones, okay? Because you can't see down those curvy ones. All right? The surface of your driveway, it doesn't have to be concrete or tar. Class 5 is fine. But you know what our shoulder seasons are like, right? The reason why I say class 5 in a nice firm is our shoulder seasons, when frost is coming out or when we have a lot of rain. We don't want a big rig getting caught in the driveway, okay? So you want to make sure that you have a good surface. If your driveway is longer than 150 feet, you want to make sure that there is plenty of turnaround for that rig. Minimum 30 feet, okay, in diameter. So we want to make sure that who's ever coming in can turn around and come out fast, okay? All right, wildfire behavior. This is what I call what feeds that fire. 3 things: fuels, weather, and your terrain or topography. 2 things you cannot control: topography or terrain, or the weather. The weather, drought, humidity levels, as Aaron said. One of my firefighters who was at one of my Brimson wildfire preparedness said that the humidity level was 8. There were no leaves. The wind was incredible. You can't control that, but you can be aware of it. Same thing with your terrain, the topography, if you live on a hill or if you're in a valley. Fire travels up a hill faster. And that means if you have defensible space, we'll get into that, you want to make sure that you have more defensible space because you're going to need it if you're sitting on top of a hill. But what is the thing that you can't control here? Fuel. That's what you can control. Next. So, what are the things that can burn your structure down? It's not necessarily that wall of fire coming in from a wildfire. It's the embers coming off of that fire, the firebrands. They can travel over a mile in a big wind, okay? One of my firefighters from Ely said to me, Gloria, you know, when we have a blizzard here and all that snow, that's what a firebrand shower looks like. So when we talk about these Firewise best practices, what we're trying to do is make sure that those embers do not find a nice dry bed to sit and start a fire. The next type of fire is a surface fire. That's a surface fire that crawls along the ground. Low intensity fire can be prescribed fire, can be a surface fire, a little bit easier to control. Okay, but again, from Superior National Forest, one of my firefighters said to me during the Brimson fire, the surface fires, we had very few crowning of that fire, but we have surface fires. But because it was so windy and so dry, it went right up to the houses. Okay? So think about that. What we try to avoid is a crown fire. And that's when the fire goes up the trees and are up in the ground, and then all bets are out. People are pulled back because they can't control that as well. All right, so you might have heard the term home ignition zone or defensible zone. This is what we're talking about, is your structure site. The first zone is what we call the immediate zone. It's 0 to 5 feet, and that's 0 to 5 feet around every structure you have. That means your house, your garage, your sauna, your outhouse, 0 to 5 feet. And I will talk more about why those areas are so important. The next zone is 5 to 30 feet. And the zone after that is 30 to 100 feet. So let's look at that 0 to 5 feet. All right. I'm going to say this is critical. Again, firefighter from the Superior National Forest said to me on my way to my Crimson event, Gloria, 0 to 5. Tell people how important that 0 to 5 feet from your structure, not having anything flammable. That means no mulch. That means no propane tanks. That means no firewood. That means if you have bigger trees and branches are hanging over, you want to make sure that they are at least 10 feet away from your structures. No pine needles. If you do have grass or if you do have plants around your foundation, make sure they're watered. But I tell you, after Jeff told me about this house that basically had grass, short grass, all the way up to the structure, but it was dry and started that house on fire, it made me think twice about even saying it's okay to have grass. Okay? So what do you put? Rocks. Come on. A concrete path, a stone path, something that will stop that fire dead within 5 feet of your structure. Okay? 5 to 30 feet. Okay, 5 to 30 feet. I'm going to be harsh here. Get rid of those 6-inch diameter last balsam fir. Dead or alive. 6-inch, about like this, okay? Because they are flammable. Look at your understory. Make sure you're removing anything that can create what we call a ladder, meaning it can ignite and ladder up into the crowns of the trees and start a crown fire. So that's what we're looking at. We want to get rid of that. Any dead debris within that 30-foot zone. If you have big pine trees, white, red, jack, make sure they're trimmed up at least a minimum of 6 to 10 feet from the furthest branch. Okay, again, you're trying to keep that understory clear. And I already talked about branches that are within 10 feet of your roof or your siding and definitely your chimney. You want to make sure they're cut. Propane tanks. If you have a propane tank, ideally it should be 30 feet away from your house, but some of our propane tanks aren't. They're 10 feet away. That's the minimum. Okay. You want to make sure totally clear around a vegetation. Don't put those cute little wood lattice fences around. Not a good idea. Okay. Plan. You want to also make sure that above that tank that you have no pine branches hanging over. Because, and think about this, a full propane tank is a safe propane tank. Because if it's partially full, what happens in the event of a fire, it's really hot on the outside and it boils that propane and it creates a gas. And then the gas will release in that release valve and it can be a flame going straight up. So when you go home and you have a propane tank, go and look, what's above there? Think if a 30-foot flame went straight up, is that going to start something on fire? So think about that with your propane tanks. Pine needles in the gutters and on the roof. Number one cause of fires. Again, those embers, looking for that dry spot. So get those pine needles off. Those gutters, you got pine needles or debris there. All it takes is a day or two, even after a torrential downpour, to dry out with full sun. So you want to make sure you got nothing in those gutters. Okay. The 30 to 100 feet. One thing I also want you to do when you go home, take a tape measure. See where these zones are. 0 to 5 is not very much. 5 to 30 is not very much. Even this 30 to 100 feet is not very much. When I do this for neighborhoods, we actually put stakes out so people can see that. Because sometimes you think, oh my God, how am I going to clear all this stuff? It's so much work, whatever. It's not that much, okay? So in this 30 to 100 feet, again, this is just like me. I do not want to see those balsam. If you do have some, if they're still alive, if you have just one here or there, okay, that's okay. But again, treeing up those conifers 10 feet out of the ground. Let's see. This is a tricky thing for me. So when we're talking 30 to 60, they recommend that your crowns are 12 feet apart. I'm not going to tell anybody to cut down their white or red pines. I can't do that. I can't do that. So again, this is just a recommendation. And that's what all these things are. They're recommendations. These are not shaming tools. These are choices. Okay? Choices that you can make, whatever works for you. 60 to 100 feet. Suggestion is 6 feet between the crowns. Okay. Okay. So sorry. I know. Okay. We've already talked about some of these. Structure. Your structure itself. A roof. Metal roofs. Fantastic. But we can't all afford them, right? Asphalt shingles are okay. They are fire rated now. If you have an asphalt roof that's over 20 years old, replace it. They're flammable, okay? Next. We already talked about the decks and foundations. If you have a deck or a porch foundation, do not store your firewood underneath there. Do not store your leftover construction material, your boat, your propane tank. Don't do that. Very flammable. Those embers looking for dry beds. So what I suggest you do is clean out everything under those porch and open foundations. If your cabin is up on blocks, and then screen it with an 1/8-inch mesh, metal mesh or less. Why? One, we don't want to ever crawl underneath there again and clean it out, right? Two, we don't want any critters going in there and building nests because they're super flammable. And three, again, it's those embers looking for a dry bed. And if you have that metal mesh, then it will break it up. Next. Okay, we already covered most of this, so I am finishing up. We already talked about the propane tank. If you have a wood burning stove or a fireplace, make sure it has a spark arrestor on it. Soffits, gable vent, 1/8-inch mesh or less. And again, that's super important for those embers. Big windows. I know a lot of us have big windows. Okay, I'm not going to tell you to get rid of your big windows, but better to have them double pane or triple pane because the heat from outside will radiate and start things inside on fire. So that's pretty much it, I think. Yep. Cost share programs. If you want to know, oh, where's the money, honey? This is what usually people will sit through my little spiel here to get to this. So right now, this is just a list of different options for landowners. Their cost share programs, Minnesota DNR Tower. We have our soil and water people, North Soil and Water people, the Natural Resource Conservation Services, and then of course our Firewise programs in St. Louis County and Lake County. More resources, which I think is on the worksheet. Go ahead. And I think woody debris disposal sites. If you don't know, this is where your woody debris disposal sites are, courtesy of the West Zone Superior National Forest. And then I'm sure you all know where the county ones are. That's it. I'm sorry. I went way over. Thank you.